Why does every connection with an avoidant feel like a pattern you can't escape? Relationships are hard enough on their own, but with an avoidant, it's a different kind of difficult. Things can feel good one moment and uncertain the next. You never really know where you stand. They can be present, even affectionate, but the moment connection starts to feel emotionally close, they step back, not always physically, but emotionally. The warmth fades a little, the conversation gets shorter, and you start to feel that quiet space between you growing again. It's not rejection. It's how they manage pressure. The closer things get, the more they need to pull away just enough to breathe. In this video, we're going to look at why the cycle of attraction and distance with an avoidant keeps repeating, and what you can do to finally break it. If you've ever felt stuck in that push and pull with someone who keeps their distance, stay with me. This is how the cycle of attraction and distance begins. You move closer because you want to feel connected. They move back because they want to feel calm. Both actions make perfect sense on their own. They just don't fit together. One person feels safe when closeness increases. The other feels safe when it decreases. So every time you reach out, they feel pressure. And every time they pull back, you feel uncertain. The result isn't conflict. It's repetition. You both keep doing what feels right, and it keeps giving the same result. That's why the pattern feels impossible to escape. It isn't built on misunderstanding. It's built on how each person finds safety in opposite ways. Once you see that, the cycle stops looking mysterious. It's not that one person cares less, it's that both are using opposite strategies to stay steady. The problem is, neither method works when it's met by the other. The person who reaches out thinks closeness will calm both of them, but for the avoidant, that same closeness feels like pressure building. So they pull away, not to hurt, but to breathe. That space helps them feel balanced again, but to the other person, it feels like loss. And loss always makes people chase. Now, both are reacting to reactions. You reach because they step back. They step back because you reach. It's a closed loop. One side chasing peace through connection, the other through distance. No one is wrong. It just doesn't fit. And because neither side knows how to pause, the loop resets every time someone tries to fix it. Breaking that loop doesn't start with changing the avoidant. It starts with understanding the rhythm. You can't control their distance, but you can control what you do when it appears. If you stop reacting to it like an emergency, the pattern loses power. Space no longer means rejection. It just means they're regulating in the only way they know how. When you stop chasing, they stop running. The irony is, the less you try to hold on, the easier it becomes for them to stay. Avoidants aren't allergic to closeness, they're allergic to pressure. The moment they sense they can breathe inside connection, their guard starts to drop. That's when real stability begins. Not through pursuit, but through calm presence. It's easy to think that if you just say the right thing or explain how you feel, the avoidant will finally understand and stop pulling away. But that's the trap, because what you're trying to do is fix the distance by closing it, while they're trying to fix the pressure by widening it. Every effort to bring them closer adds more tension. You start to adjust. You send shorter messages. You wait longer to reply. You pretend you don't care as much. It's not dishonesty, it's survival. You're trying to protect the connection without losing yourself. But inside, you still feel the same pull, the wish to be seen, the need to feel steady again. The avoidant senses that underneath the calm surface and keeps their guard up. They're not trying to confuse you. They're trying to stop the relationship from feeling like too much. Avoidants don't fear you. They fear the feeling of being absorbed by someone else's expectations. So even small things, a tone, a question, a shift in energy, can feel like pressure. When they step back, it's not to punish you. It's to breathe again. The problem is that pause feels like abandonment. So you try to reconnect. You reach out gently, or maybe you push harder, hoping it'll remind them of what you had. But that's how the cycle stays alive. The avoidant doesn't hear your words. They feel your urgency. And the moment they sense it, their instinct is to protect their space again. Over time, both sides start responding to fear instead of love. You fear losing them, they fear being pulled in, and together you build a rhythm made of good intentions that keep canceling each other out. That's the real trap. Both people trying to save the connection in ways that quietly destroy it. Here's how you start to break the cycle. Not by pulling away or giving up, and not by chasing every time they retreat, but by learning to stay steady when distance appears. The moment you stop reacting to it like a threat, the dynamic starts to change. Avoidants aren't reacting to you as a person. They're reacting to the feeling of being emotionally cornered. When you respond with calm instead of urgency, they no longer need to protect themselves in the same way. This is the hardest part, because everything in you wants to fix what feels broken. You sense the gap forming, and your instinct is to close it. You send a message, you check in, you try to remind them of what you had. It feels like love, but to them, it feels like demand. The more effort you put into repairing the connection, the more they associate you with the pressure they're trying to escape. It's not about words, it's about energy. They're not hearing what you're saying. They're feeling why you're saying it. The way out begins with recognizing that distance doesn't mean rejection. It means the avoidant has hit their internal limit and is trying to reset. That's not your cue to disappear, and it's not your signal to pursue. It's your moment to hold still, to stay grounded, to let space exist without trying to fill it. When you stop interpreting distance as loss, you stop feeding the loop. You can stay available without being intrusive. You can stay caring without being urgent. That balance is what the avoidant never gets to experience. Someone who is emotionally present, but not demanding closeness. That's the environment where their guard starts to lower on its own. Because now, space doesn't mean danger, it means safety. Over time, this new rhythm changes both of you. The avoidant learns that connection doesn't require surrender. You learn that love doesn't require control. The tension starts to dissolve, not through conversation, but through experience. When the avoidant feels safe enough to stay close without losing autonomy, they begin to relax into the relationship naturally. The pattern stops because the fear behind it is gone. Escaping the cycle isn't about creating more closeness. It's about building tolerance for space. Once that happens, the emotional push and pull loses its force. You're no longer trying to convince them to stay, and they're no longer trying to protect themselves from being pulled in. That's how stability begins. Quietly, without a moment of realization. Just through repetition of calm instead of reaction. And it's in that quiet where the dynamic finally resets. The distance that once felt unbearable becomes just another part of connection. It doesn't scare you anymore, and it doesn't scare them. That's when both people start to meet each other from choice, not fear. And that's the moment the cycle breaks for good. Here's how you start to break the cycle. Not by walking away, not by chasing, and not by waiting for the avoidant to change. The way out begins when you stop treating distance as proof that something is wrong. Most people panic when closeness fades. They assume it means disinterest, but for an avoidant, it's often the opposite. It means they care enough to feel the pressure of the connection and are trying to regulate it. When you start to see distance as a form of balance instead of rejection, everything about the rhythm changes. Think of connection with an avoidant as a space that expands and contracts. When it expands, you both feel warmth. When it contracts, they're trying to keep the relationship breathable. The mistake is assuming the contraction means the end of love. It doesn't. It's just their way of staying functional inside the bond. What breaks the cycle is not forcing the expansion to come back faster, but learning to stay steady during the contraction. That's the real work, not chasing reassurance, not pretending you don't care, but building tolerance for uncertainty. Because uncertainty is what triggers both sides. When you can hold still instead of reacting, the avoidant begins to sense something new. Calm, where they expect tension. They're used to people reacting to their silence. They're not used to someone staying present without demanding closeness. That calm confuses their pattern in the best way possible. It gives them a reason to stay instead of a reason to run. You might think holding still means doing nothing, but it's not passive. It's active self-regulation. It's the moment you choose not to feed the loop. You can still send a message, but it comes from steadiness, not fear. You can still show care, but without asking for reassurance in return. Every time you do that, you reteach the relationship what safety feels like. Calm, consistent, unhurried. That's how the rhythm slowly resets. The truth is, avoidants don't avoid people. They avoid intensity. They protect themselves from the feeling of being emotionally swallowed. When you show them that connection can breathe, that you can stay available without invading their space, you're showing them something they've rarely experienced. That's when emotional safety starts to form. This takes time. The first few times you stay calm while they step back, your mind will still race. You'll still want to fix it, explain it, or make it right. But each time you resist that impulse, the system rewires a little. You realize that silence doesn't have to mean rejection, that space can coexist with care, and slowly, the fear that drives the cycle loses its grip. You'll also notice something else. The avoidant begins to return sooner, softer, more consistent. It's not magic. It's biology meeting safety. When they sense that they can come close without being trapped, they do it naturally. What once took days of silence now takes hours, then minutes. They start to associate you with calm instead of pressure. That's the quiet transformation that breaks the cycle. Not confrontation, not long talks, just a repeated experience of safety. There's a point where the pattern stops feeling like a chase and starts feeling like a rhythm you both understand. Distance no longer threatens connection. It becomes part of how it breathes. You don't have to overthink every pause or wonder what you did wrong. You simply hold your ground. That steadiness changes everything because it removes the fear that keeps the loop alive. Breaking the cycle isn't about gaining control. It's about releasing it. The moment you stop trying to control when they come close or when they pull away, you step out of the game entirely. The avoidant can finally relax because they no longer feel managed, and you can finally rest because you're no longer waiting for constant proof of connection. Eventually, what you build isn't a perfect relationship. It's a stable one. One where both people can move in and out of closeness without panic. That's what the cycle was always missing. Trust that space doesn't erase love, and silence doesn't mean loss. When both of you start to feel that truth, the dynamic that once felt unbreakable simply stops repeating. And the best part? It doesn't end in a big moment. It ends quietly, when calm replaces urgency, when you stop counting the pauses, and when connection stops feeling like something you have to win back. That's when you know you're free from the cycle. Not because you walked away, but because you stopped running inside it. Once you understand the rhythm, the next step is learning how to live inside it without feeding the old pattern. Breaking the cycle isn't about forcing a change in the avoidant, it's about behaving in a way that makes the old cycle impossible to sustain. When distance appears, the first impulse is to act. You want to clarify, reach out, fix the silence. But every action taken from anxiety teaches the other person that closeness equals tension. The way to shift the pattern is to act from calm, not fear. Before you respond, check your intention. If it's about easing your discomfort, pause. If it's about honest connection, continue. but with no expectation of what they'll do next. Consistency is what the avoidant learns to trust. When you stop overcorrecting, not swinging between pursuit and withdrawal, they start to relax. You're no longer another unpredictable source of pressure. You're steady. That steadiness slowly becomes the new reference point. When they pull away, you don't chase, but you also don't punish. You hold space. You might say something simple, like, "I'm here when you're ready." Then you go on with your day. You stay real, available, grounded. That balance is rare for them. It signals emotional safety without demanding emotional labor. When they return, resist the urge to dissect the distance. Don't turn the reunion into an analysis. Instead, respond naturally. Meet them as if the bond never vanished. That shows that space didn't threaten your connection. And over time, that's what rewires their sense of safety. They stop associating closeness with losing freedom, because you've shown it's possible to have both. What matters most is repetition. One calm response won't undo years of guarded habits, but dozens will. The nervous system learns through patterns, not promises. If your behavior stays steady across cycles, the avoidant stops anticipating pressure. That's when they begin to approach voluntarily, not defensively. Avoidants test consistency, often without realizing it. They step back to see if you'll react the way everyone else did, to confirm the pattern still exists. Each time you respond with calm presence instead of urgency, you're quietly teaching them that connection can exist without control. That's how their guard begins to drop. Not through confrontation, but through predictability. And remember, staying calm doesn't mean suppressing your needs. You can still express them, but timing and tone matter. Speak from steadiness, not fear. Say what's true without trying to make it land. The goal isn't to persuade, it's to stay authentic. Avoidants respond better to quiet truth than emotional intensity because it doesn't feel like demand. Eventually, you realize the cycle isn't something to escape from, it's something to outgrow. The same dynamic that once created anxiety becomes an opportunity to build emotional balance. When you no longer fear distance, the avoidant no longer fears closeness. Both sides find space to breathe, and that's when connection finally becomes sustainable. When the loop finally stops repeating, something subtle changes. The silence that once felt heavy now feels neutral. You stop counting the pauses or worrying about what they mean. The avoidant stops tracking how much space they need to feel safe. Without anyone trying to manage the rhythm, it starts to regulate itself. This is what a stable connection with an avoidant actually looks like. Not constant closeness, but consistent presence. Some days there's warmth and flow, other days there's quiet. Neither side panics anymore. The anxious energy that once drove every reaction gives way to steadiness. You can enjoy closeness without chasing it and accept space without fearing it. That balance teaches both people something important. The avoidant learns that connection doesn't have to cost them freedom. You learn that space doesn't erase love. Each time you handle distance with calm, the relationship becomes safer for both of you. That safety builds more naturally than any conversation about it ever could. The irony is that the relationship deepens the moment you stop trying to deepen it. Closeness stops being a negotiation. It becomes a quiet rhythm. Approach, breathe, connect, rest. That rhythm is sustainable because it respects both people's ways of feeling safe. And when both people feel safe, love no longer needs protection. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean forcing constant connection. It means creating one that can breathe. It's not about winning the avoidant over. It's about learning to stand so calmly in your own center that the push and pull loses its meaning. Once you reach that point, you stop needing reassurance because you already know where you stand, not in their moods, but in yourself. So if you've lived inside this pattern, take a moment and notice how much energy it's taken to hold on, to understand, to fix. You don't have to keep doing that. The shift begins when you stop trying to make connection happen and start allowing it to unfold at its own pace. The avoidant doesn't need convincing, they need safety. And safety begins with how you respond, not how much you explain. That's the real end of the cycle. Not distance disappearing, but peace returning. You'll know you're there when silence no longer feels like loss. Just space. Shared between two people who finally trust that it won't take love away. If you've lived through this pattern, share your experience in the comments. What part of the cycle felt hardest for you to break? And if this helped you see things differently, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps more people find their way out of this loop. Thanks for watching.